Morning.
Morning, Joe. Brian's here.
Hey, Brian.
Trish, you there?
Hi, Joe. Hi, Brian.
Hi.
Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you fine. Are you going in through the computer or through the phone?
I am doing both. So I have my audio on my phone and I'm doing the handling the slideshow on my laptop. So I can do the polling through that way. That's my workaround, Brian.
Yeah, so the audio portion's through the phone?
Audio's through the phone. Yeah.
Okay.
I actually find their Zoom app to be really good.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay. So
Very
something to
good.
keep in mind.
So if you look at the panelists now, I don't know if you can see that, but what I see is I see Joe Biggs, I see Brian, and then I see I'm logged in twice.
Yeah, that's right.
So let's see, we have
Hey, Trish.
yep.
So the attendees will be able to log on before the call, correct?
Yeah, they should be able to join at any time.
Okay, great. Great.
I'll be watching that.
Okay,
For sure.
good. Yeah. Joe, we had some technical difficulties on the last webinar where the attendees weren't showing up on the attendee list as we were talking, as we were doing it. So the whole time, and like for the first 5 minutes while we're speaking, I'm actually seeing that no one's attending, and I had like a mini freak out. But it turned out to be okay.
I've rejoined.
Hey, Joe, how are you?
I'm doing all right.
Great. I think audio all sounds good. So we just need some folks to start attending.
Let me share my screen then and get that going, and
Sure.
off we go.
Sure, that'll be there so that, now we have it set up so that when people join, they should be automatically joining. They shouldn't be like waiting in the waiting room or anything. So I haven't started to broadcast yet. So it's just still the three of us. But as soon as I hit broadcast, it'll be available to be out there. So Joe, we did reach 30 registered attendees this morning, so that's great news. That was kind of what our target was, and
Excellent.
Also had a couple people ask if this was they registered for it, but they knew they had another commitment, so they're looking forward to getting the link of the recording. So that's good news.
Awesome. So can you see my slides?
Yep, that looks great. I see that. That's great. People will log on. They'll see that. And what I'll probably do is, I'll start broadcasting before 12, probably at like 11:55, and I'll let you guys know so we don't like jibber jabber in front of people. But and then we'll just kind of wait, like maybe for a couple minutes, a minute or two after noon, just so people have a chance to log on, and then I'll go ahead and say the intro. Thanks for joining us for today's webinar, and then I'll introduce you, or I'll talk about Joe Biggs, talk about how they can get a PDU for watching today, and then I'll introduce Brian. Brian, you'll say some words about PMO Partners, and then you'll introduce Joe. So that's our sequence of events.
That's perfect.
And Joe, you're going to move through the slides. I think it's pretty basic.
Yeah, it's pretty intuitive. So yeah, I'll take us through as we transition.
Okay. And I've got in my notes that we're going to do 2 polls today. One will be at the between slide 9 and 11, and the other between 14 and 15. So, and then we'll do. And I think you said you wanted to do a time. You wanted me to maybe do a time check at like 11:40.
Yeah.
And say, okay, we're Joe, we're just to do a time check. We got about 20 minutes left, and then you can keep going and go into a QA when you're all set.
Sounds like a plan.
All right. All right. All right. All right. Any guys have any questions or anything? I'm going to just go ahead and hit broadcast so we can start seeing if people want to get on before noon. If that's all right.
Yeah, I'm good. I'd leave it to Joe.
That works for me.
Okay. Awesome. Here we go. Okay, we are now broadcasting. Good afternoon, everyone. We're going to get going in just a minute. Just going to have another few seconds to get everybody attending, and then we're going to get going. Okay, let's go ahead and get started with today's webinar. Thanks so much for joining us for guiding your organization through the PPM decision-making process. My name is Trisha Champa with PMO Partners, and we're very excited to have Joe Biggs here today presenting this webinar. Joe Biggs is a subject matter expert in program and project management, a QA leader, and a true change agent. His broad expertise includes agile transformation as well as PMO audits. In his most recent position as ePMO governance and standards controller, he was responsible for process, prioritization, measurement, and outcome management of a large program portfolio. And if you would like to reach out to Joe for more information, his email is at the bottom of this slide, josephwbiggs@hotmail.com, and you can also find him on LinkedIn. And for the PMP folks that are here today, please feel free to log into PMI under Digital Online Media and enter in for 1 PDU for attending today's webinar. And I would log that under the technical area. And now I'd like to introduce Brian Abrams, founder of PMO Partners, and he's going to say a few words and then introduce Joe. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Trisha, and thank you everyone for joining today. I do see some familiar names and also some new names, so that's great. Welcome to everybody. This is actually our fourth webinar now, and we're excited to bring this webinar series to you folks monthly on topics that are very relevant to IT project management, not only for folks that manage projects, but also for project management leaders as well. PMO Partners is a niche staffing firm. We specialize in placing IT project managers both on a contract basis and a permanent basis with our clients across New England. If anyone would like to learn more about us, my information is at the bottom. You can go to our website as well. And I'm very excited to introduce Joe Biggs, who has a great presentation for us today. So Joe, whenever you're ready, take it away.
Thank you, Brian, and thank you, Tricia. Good afternoon to everyone. Hopefully you're all prepared to go through this journey of setting yourselves up for the key decisions that you'll need to make as you think about moving to a PPM system. So why don't we jump ahead right into the agenda. We've already done the welcome. I'll spend a few minutes talking to you about PPM definitions, just to set the playing field, on a level ground. We'll talk a lot about assessing your levels of maturity and that is going to lead you up to that key decision-making process. I want to spend a couple minutes briefly to talk about, as you've gone through your maturity level determination, how do you take your strengths that you have with your level of maturity, and how do you take your weaknesses and turn that into an advantage for your organization or for you as an individual as you're trying to manage this project or this process. We'll spend a great deal of time on understanding the decision criteria behind trying to make that decision whether you want to go with a PPM tool, what the PPM tool should be, and then once you've made that decision, you've engaged, you've got the tool running, I'm going to give you some tips and techniques on how to make sure that you can manage your vendor before the purchase of the tool and certainly after the purchase of the tool. So with that said, why don't we go ahead and get started? Just a couple of quick terms. Excuse me. So what is portfolio management, right? And it's project and portfolio management is PPM standard. So what's portfolio management? And I'm not going to read every one of these little bullets to you, but the active practice for making investment decisions in order to make the largest possible return. I'll read the next one and then I'll kind of give you my views on this. What is the project portfolio management scenario? Project portfolio management is a term used by project managers and project management organizations to describe the methods for analyzing and collecting, managing a group of current or proposed projects based on their numerous key characteristics. So when you start thinking of project and portfolio management, it's what are you trying to do? How are you trying to get yourself set up? And then how are you going to manage these entities, these pieces of projects or portfolios of large projects as you go forward? So some of the key basic things that you're trying to make decisions on, key inputs that you need to think about is, are you doing hard economic measures? Are you looking at business strategies as your goal to drive you through the portfolio tool, through the portfolio setup? What are your constraints? What's been imposed upon you by management or external real-world factors that go into making a decision as to what are the things you're going to manage and what's that possible return? So key definitions that you need to focus on. Questions, guys, will hold till the end of the presentation. So I'm going to go through this. My build on this gave me a little problem a few minutes ago, so I'm going to pop the whole slide. So, all right. So again, from a components perspective of project and portfolio management, the first thing you want to do with a project and portfolio management decision or tool or set of criteria is to select the right projects, right? The goal is that we want to do the right projects at the right time that have the most value for the company or provide the most value to one of your business units that's a driving business unit. So selecting those projects and then aligning them to either a business strategy or key criteria that are going to let you know and make sure that you have a project that is selected, prioritized, and set up properly. So once you've done that, you want to optimize that portfolio. So when I say optimizing that portfolio, that means taking that project or that set of projects or portfolios of projects and ensuring that they maintain their level of highest priority, that they're going to provide the outcome and return on investment that you're looking for. And at times, as you optimize that list of projects, new projects come in to bear. So you've got to prioritize and deprioritize through that overall management of that portfolio of projects. And new limitations and constraints come up. We all know as we manage projects, budgets change throughout the year, priorities change throughout the year. So your ability to optimize the portfolio, understand how to deprioritize, reprioritize, become really, really critical. And protect that value, right? So anything that you put in that portfolio, you're going to want to monitor. You're going to want to make sure that it's got health. It's managed properly. It's tracking the way you need it to track. And project management portfolio tools are going to help you do that. And then managing risk. You know, projects can go off the rails pretty rapidly. You need to be able to put all that data into a place where you can track it and have a clear measurement and indication for your business units. Mature the portfolio process. So you've got now a great list of projects. You've optimized it. You're protecting it. You're monitoring it. You're managing it on a regular basis. Now you can start to mature some of those processes. You can get more into things like benefit management and how that applies. You can absolutely track it back to key initiative and key criteria that your company's trying to set and truly show a differentiation in your ability to manage projects and portfolios. And ultimately, the goal is to maximize the value of the projects within your organization. Okay, I'm going to spend a couple minutes on this, just briefly touch on it. one of the first things you need to do before you step off and try to undertake the process of looking at portfolio management tools, you really need to understand where you are on your maturity level. If you're an immature PMO, or if you're an immature set of project leaders, if you're not very mature in your basic processes, it's going to be very difficult for a PPM tool to be implemented and be successful. So ultimately, you're going to need to understand where you are on your maturity level. Are you mature enough to be able to take a tool and have it be effective? And a lot of times people argue and debate where that tool fits in and what the purpose of the tool is. But I'm a firm believer that a tool is only as good as the processes and the maturity levels that exist today. A tool is not going to come in. If you're at an immature level, you're not very savvy at some of the things that I'm going to mention in a second, the tool is not going to solve those problems for you. And too often, a vendor is going to come in and tell you, oh, this tool can solve all your problems. That's not necessarily true. I'm sure it can solve some problems, but if you're at an immature level, it's not going to do you a whole lot of good to purchase a very expensive and very complex tool that you don't have supporting processes or maturity to stand up with it. So what I suggest for everybody is to go and do an audit. Understand where you are in that priority level. Ask yourselves a few basic questions. So assess your readiness for starting to head down the PPM path. And you can do that through a number of tools. I've mentioned a couple of them here. You can look at Gartner's 5 levels, which I'm going to talk about in 1 second. You can go to PMI and look at the PMO maturity cube, which is going to give you good indications of where you are on that maturity curve. We'll talk about that in a second. And then what you're going to do is you want to assess your key areas to see how you're performing. How well do you perform in scope management? Are your projects scoped effectively? If you've got an organization that's not feeding that scope fast enough and you're constantly rescoping projects as you go, that may be difficult as you start to look at PPM tools. Time management, are your projects being finished on time? Are they constantly changing time value and moving around and therefore putting pressure on your portfolio to do other things because things constantly shift in time? Cost management is critically important. I'm going to talk about finance during the presentation and their criticality to this whole process. So cost management, how well are you managing your costs? What's the level of quality of the projects that you're running? What kind of risks do you assess upfront and during the project, and how well are they managed? People management, how well are you managing the resources within those projects? Do you have a dedicated team of resources, which makes it kind of easy? Do you have a shared pool of resources, which makes it kind of difficult? And those are all key piece parts that you need when you start to think about PPM. And then communication management, how well is your reporting done? How well do you communicate change in your organization? How effective are you? Briefly going to touch on this, but this is Gartner's maturity model, and it's got 5 levels to it. Each level shows you the level of maturity that you're going to go to. Level 1 is pretty basic. It's reactive. Most of the things that you do are centered on management's critical projects. You don't have a lot of formal management tools. You have budgetary estimates for things, but it's not necessarily written in stone. They're not really well defined. As you begin to move up that maturity curve, you get to level 2, which is called emerging discipline. Your projects are following much more standardized processes. Maybe you have a PMO established. Projects are hopefully aligned to a strategy at this level, and they've got some level of prioritization. Prioritization is one of those funny things, though. Prioritization can really be a great thing, and it can be a really bad thing depending on how your organization treats it. Prioritization can be, and I've worked in organizations where it was a forced prioritization of projects. And that's okay sometimes, but sometimes the people who force the priority on that project don't necessarily consider prioritization for other pieces. So understanding what type of prioritization you're going to use is kind of important there. Level 3, initial integration. So you've got much more specialized PPM leadership and roles formalized within your organization. Cross-functional groups are formed, and you got a lot of collaboration happening. Career paths are defined. If you go to level 4, effective integration, so you've got solid levels of competency that improve your workload management. So you've got a lot of people involved in that workload. You've got your business folks, you've got your development and engineering teams, you've got you as project managers or project management leadership, all involved in that planning process. You've got multiple methods that exist and can be used by any of the PMs. Maybe you're using Agile, maybe using Waterfall, maybe using a hybrid version of something. And the most important thing as you get to the level 4, level 5 areas is benefit realization, outcome and benefit. So what's the benefit of the project that you're really trying to look for? Benefit management, and then are you driving to that outcome? And then level 5 is effective innovation, where you talk about change operations, having a very solid change management process, even though you probably have some level of change management down at level 1, 2, 3, and 4. Rapid strategy execution, you can transition and transform your strategic initiatives into solid project plans, solid project portfolios. And in many cases at that level, they've formed EPMOs that kind of fuse the entire PMOs together, because many companies have multiple PMOs and they bring it together with a single EPMO. Okay, so you're going to do your audit. You're going to understand where your strengths and weaknesses are. And you will have strengths and you will have weaknesses. I haven't run into any organization that was lacking either. Some have more strengths, some have more weaknesses. But it's always important to understand what you have, because it gives you the opportunity on the areas that you need to focus to improve. So understand that those weaknesses, and many companies and many project managers that I've worked with and mentored don't want to share those weaknesses. If I share the weaknesses, they're going to say I can't do something, they're going to say I have a gap. Well, yeah, you do. And if you don't position that gap effectively, it's always going to be a gap. Even though you're trying to work it on the background, that gap will expose itself in one way, shape, or form at some point. So don't be afraid to share that you've got a gap. But when you share that gap, make sure that you're communicating that with a plan that you have to address it. So develop an improvement plan, which may include and will likely include the deployment of a PPM tool as a key differentiator for you to be able to streamline, automate, make your world a whole lot better. So don't be afraid to communicate those weaknesses. When preparing to move to a PPM solution, take those weaknesses and position them with the vendor, because in a lot of cases that vendor can help you eliminate some of those weaknesses through the tool with some improvement based on what that tool can provide you. And the vendors are really good about providing and bridging those gaps. When you first sit down with them and you start to position the tool, they'll come in and help you fill in the gaps so that they become strengths. Quick wins are important, but also filling gaps are important. So try to find that right balance. So quick wins and trying to repair your weaknesses are key, or using your strengths are key, but filling in your gaps are important as well. Take the time to try to find a good balance in doing that. And then I put a quote here from Zig Ziglar. Try to look at your weaknesses and convert them into strengths. That's success. And you'll find that eliminating those weaknesses are really going to put you in a great position. All right, the topic you really wanted to hear about. So I'm a firm believer in a step-by-step process, a phase-by-phase process and approach to making critical decisions. You want that mile marker. You want to know that you're making progress. You want to know that you can stop at each step and assess where you are. And also look ahead to say, am I completely prepared to go to that next step? And in a lot of cases, you're going to deal with vendors who are going to come in and tell you that, we've got the process. We'll take you through it. You really, I have to emphasize, PPM tools, PPM solutions are very complex and can be very expensive. For you to make that decision, you really want to make sure that you're following some level of a process by which you're going to make your decisions, and pick the right tool, pick the right thing for you. So let's talk about the first step, step 0. I call it the pre-approval step. And what you really need to do, first and foremost, if you're heading down this PPM tool path, if you're going to head down that path of maturity, you need to get your leadership involved. Share your assessment and your audit results. Share the fact that you do have some strengths and weaknesses, and share how you're planning to improve them. Educate.
Hey, Joe, I just wanted to just check in here as you're talking about sharing your assessment and audit results. If you wanted to poll the attendees today to see about their how they're assessing and auditing their organizations, we do have a poll ready to launch. Is this a good time to do that?
Yeah, let's go ahead with that.
Okay, we wanted to ask folks how many people assess or audit their project-based organizations regularly, minimum yearly, just to get a feel for what's happening out there with you folks. Okay, looks like we've got some votes coming in, and I'll just share these in a second. Okay, looks like we have 50% saying no, 25% saying yes, and 25% saying not sure. So gives you some idea, Joe.
All right. So for those of you who are doing regular assessments, that's a great thing. Congratulations. You're probably ahead of the curve. Try to kill that email. Sorry about that. For those of you who are not, I encourage you to try to get into a regular period of assessment. It doesn't have to be super formal. It can be if you'd like it to be. But try to assess where you are on the maturity curve as at least once a year. So you've gone through the process, you've educated your leadership, then you need to prepare your leadership groups for what this PPM tool may be, should be, could be. So prepare those leadership groups. Finance, I cannot emphasize to you enough how important it is to engage finance early in your decision criteria process, because they're a key partner. And they're one of the most important beneficiaries in a PPM tool scenario, because you are actually going to have the ability to show them clearly in your PPM data that a project is being managed, it's being monitored, you can look at all the financials. We did things in some of my previous lives like continuous forecasting, helping the finance team forecast against key projects and key portfolios. It becomes crucial that they become a participant. So engage your finance teams as early as possible. The business, and people are going to go, well, the business, all they do is mess up the projects. They're the ones who get in the way and make us cause all the risk, cause all the problems. But you know what? When you start talking about where dollars are going to be invested within your organization, if the business doesn't have some idea that you're trying to invest in a PPM tool, or they hear that you're investing and they see what kind of dollars you might be spending, they're going to wonder where some of their investments might go. So build the value for them. Show the business where the fact that you're managing your projects more effectively and can communicate them, can engage them, can provide reporting and dashboard functionality to show that their projects are performing or not performing. Show them that you can intervene much more quickly, much sooner in the process, because you have a tool that's going to help them. So engaging the business is really important. Prepare your project teams. PPM is going to provide a level of governance and visibility that may be very new to your organization. And trust me, I've encountered it multiple times. In a lot of ways, your project teams don't necessarily want a lot of that visibility. Your engineering teams may not want to be exposed in so many ways. But trust me, your business is going to want you to be there. Your leadership wants you there. Bridge them in. Don't wait until the last minute to tell them, hey, we're going to make this PPM decision and deal with it. If you engage them early, make them part of the decision process, it's going to be a lot more palatable for them to accept going to a tool like this. And always, when you're doing tool selection, when you're trying to build your criteria, try to make sure you've got criteria built that's specific to each one of your value groups. And it's going to make it a whole lot easier if you get approval. So you've got the preliminary approval that says, yes, we believe that the PPM tool adds value. So then you're going to want to start spending some time in step one, building your PPM criteria. So how many tool vendors are you going to bring in and provide selection criteria to? Some have selection criteria that are already built, and you can actually go out and find out what their selection criteria is and use it as a template or use it as a guide for how you're going to build your criteria. But you're going to want to build PPM business value. How is this going to be aligned across your organization? How are you going to drive, will this drive collaboration across your organization? Can this enable collaboration across your organization? And build criteria into your plan for that. Is it going to improve decision-making process and accountability? I think it certainly would, and that's one of the key factors. Process value. Are you going to make, is this tool going to make things too process heavy? Anytime you make your criteria, you want something that's going to be lean yet meaningful. If you're a process person, process guru, everybody likes to make the most thorough process in the world and really make it, you know, stone tablets, if you will. Those days are gone. You really need to make things lean and mean, but they have to be meaningful. So process value is important. The level of productivity you're going to drive, what kind of criteria you're looking for that. And then what are the selection, optimization, protecting, and maturing elements that you need from those early slides I showed you. The type of PPM service you want to look at for your criteria. Are you looking as a software as a service scenario, a cloud-based solution? Are you looking for an on-premise solution? Are you looking for something different, something hybrid that you need? You need to think about those things. Your user interface. The PPM tool is not just for project managers anymore, right? It's got a finance component that finance can go in. Our finance teams in my last position were in the tool as much, if not more than I was, monitoring projects, monitoring portfolios of financials. Business intelligence now is so tightly integrated. So if you've got a heavy BI component, you're going to want to build criteria in for that. And how do you integrate that into your overall platform? And will the PPM tool that you select have a strong interface there? Does it scale? Are you a small organization, a medium-sized organization, or a large organization? Because scale is important, because there are a lot of tools out there today. And some are small and designed to fit with small organizations. Some for medium, some for large. And you really want to know what kind of organization, what kind of sizing and scale you want for your tool. Business justification and ROI. You definitely got to have this built for your criteria. Are you intending to reduce the number of projects that you run? So you're going to start eliminating projects based on the PPM tools criterion. Improvement in resource management. That's a function that a lot of the business units that I've talked to really want to get a focus on. Are we managing those resources effectively? Are we doing time tracking and timesheets within the tool? Or integrating that into the overall decision-making process. Reduction in cost overruns. Are we, eliminating those cost overruns that are so visible to the business and to leadership? Visibility. Are we going to create some new level of visibility that we've never had before? Let's write about that criteria. Reduction in project failures, and to me, one of the things that the tool provides, PPM tool provides a lot of value in, is that BI or that dashboard reporting function. We all get stuck in spreadsheet hell when we're reporting on projects. And maybe some of you are out there saying, well, I kind of like my Excel spreadsheet and it's pretty good and it provides some great data. That's good. But how well have you been able to automate that? How well have you been able to get out of that mode where you're spending hours and hours and hours putting together data when a tool can do a lot of that work for you so you can be focused on other things? Your maturity level, you know, it's going to temper your scope of purchase, but understand your maturity level. Don't overbuy or don't underbuy when you're starting to talk about your PPM tools. Integration capabilities. So financial systems, project management systems, all have to be considered. So now you've built your criteria.
Do you want to
So now you're going to want to bring your vendors in. And you want to make sure that your decision criteria is well mapped out. I suggest you put it in a simple decision matrix. There are a lot to be found online. You could build one yourself. What I would suggest, though, when you start to talk to vendors is not to have those vendors try to give you their criterion, right? They've got to be judged by your criteria, not by their own. So every time I've talked to a vendor, they tell me that it can do everything that I could ever want it to do. And in some cases, that's true. In other cases, it's not. But make sure you build your matrix. Make sure you share that matrix. Build a cross-functional team to ensure your criteria is succinct. If you're doing this as a small 1 or 2 person team and you're very focused, you're a strong project leader within your organization and you know what it takes to get a project run through it, that's great. But if you're not cross-functionally exposed to maybe somebody from your business, maybe somebody from your development teams, maybe somebody from your finance team, and as part of this overall decision-making process, you may miss something, or it may be too tempered to you and not to your overall business. This is your chance to have a really complete portfolio management platform. Go for the whole thing. Make it complete. Make it as thorough as you want it to be. And it can be scaled back later in the process if you need to. But if you scale back and you try to limit yourself going in up front, the tool is only going to provide you limited value. Use industry evaluations to provide, use some of that homework that you need as you begin to talk to vendors. Gartner, Forrester, whoever you feel you have the confidence in that has gone out and done their research, go get some of their research. One of the most important things for you to understand as you begin to build your decision-making criteria and go out and talk to vendors is there's been a lot of vendor consolidation in the marketplace today. If you know a little bit about the PPM marketplace, for example, PlanView is one of the big players. They went out recently and acquired Inutas. And Inutas was one of the smaller market players. They acquired them. Adaptive was another smaller niche player that was acquired by ChangePoint. It seems like all the big vendors, CA, Microsoft, are grabbing smaller vendors and trying to build their overall portfolios. So make sure you have a good sense for what's going on in the industry space. Then start soliciting vendors, right? So you've got criteria built. Develop an RFI or an RFP, or whatever your company requires for you to go off and solicit vendors. Go ahead and start developing that. Put that together. Work with your legal teams on non-disclosure information, documentation around your RFIs, RFPs, or whatever documentation you need to. Make sure you've got a clear summary of the business process and the solution that's sought. Vendor selection process is critically important. And you need to make sure that you put in exactly what you're expecting them to do, what dates they have to respond to, what your expectations are, what the judgeable criteria will be, that you're going to conduct a bake-off. And I'll talk to you a little bit about the concept of a bake-off in the process here in the next step. Size and scale, how many users you're going to have. And you're going to say, well, gosh, I don't really know how many users I'm going to have. You really should try to do some rough estimation because a lot of that goes into what the related cost is going to be. Be thorough. You may have room for adjustment later on, as I've been saying. And I quickly threw a Dilbert cartoon. It's always good for a presentation, but I'll quickly read it. Dilbert comes into his boss and he says, I need a $1,600 handheld barcode scanner to finish my lab tests. The boss says, okay, apply for a capital budget, a variance, prepare an RFP, get 3 bids, form a team to evaluate the bids, then prepare a purchase order. Dilbert, as a lot of people just do, never mind, I'll just learn how to read the barcodes by my own sight. And then obviously the boss calls him a quitter. Be thorough. This is your great opportunity to do that. I know there's a lot of work that goes into putting together RFPs or selection criteria, but it's going to pay you dividends by doing it down the road. Excuse me. So step 4, now you've got some vendors, right? You think you've come up with some really good vendors, some things that match your criteria. You've done your homework. You've had some good conversations with them. So you've formed your 3 to 5 person team that's going to do the level of detail and deep dive on each one of those vendors. And as you see here, I talk about make sure they're cross-focused in representation and make sure you've got finance in there. Assign a lead. Hopefully that's you, because now you know the process and you're going to be the driver of that process to coordinate and make sure everything's done well from all your response. Have an initial meeting with all the vendors to understand their capabilities. Get them in there and have them try to sell their capabilities against the core capabilities and criteria you built. But then I want you to sit down and start to narrow that field. And I want to say that I think one of the best things you could do is to conduct a bake-off. And when I say a bake-off, that means I want to get 2, 3 at the most, because you may talk to 7 or 8 different vendors, 2 or 3 at the most to come in and simulate a demo against your specific criteria. Show the fact that they can integrate with your tools, with your platform. If you've got Oracle Financials on the back end, I want to know that their tool can be effective in integrating with our financial back end or any other tool. Maybe it's the tools you use to manage your day-to-day operation. You know, maybe you're using Jira, or maybe you're using Rally, or you're using some other tool to manage. You want to know that it integrates. If it can't integrate, this tool is really not a good tool for you. That it's got a strong process engine and it can integrate well with your process, and show you that it can integrate well with the process the way you've got it yours developed. And that reporting can be done and can be effective against, have them simulate one of your reports, one of your Excel spreadsheets, and show that they can automate it and do it. A lot of vendors are going to look at that and go, oh my gosh, you know how much work that is? You know how hard that is? If they're a real vendor that you're going to want to deal with and is going to pay you dividends on the back end and give you an effective tool to manage, they will come in and do it. And I've used this for PPM tools. I come from a quality assurance background, quality automation, test automation tools. I've done this with virtually every vendor I've ever worked with. And trust me, it eliminates those vendors that you really don't want to work with. If they're not willing to do a bake-off, they're probably not worth working with in the long run. Give them 2 to 3 weeks to prepare, right? Give them a chance to prepare. Schedule a demo, and then have them come in and demo their product based on your criteria, your bake-off scenario. And then put together a rating system. So I happen to find this online. I couldn't find anything that really jumped out at me, but I like this rating of jerky and meat sticks. Not that I don't think I've ever eaten any of these products, but so they're rating beef jerky, and they're rating it by cost and calories and fat content and sodium, and trying to determine what they are. So I want you to take all those criteria that you set up and build it into your matrix, and as they're doing their bake-off, start checking off, and then start to rate who are the very good ones, who are the good ones, who are the not so good ones. And if you can get it down to your final 1, 2 vendors, you've done your job effectively. So get it down to those 1 or 2. Step 5. So now you've got your results. You feel like you've had an opportunity to identify good, better, best. Compare your bake-off results. Go over your selection criteria to determine what your vendor is that you want to invite in for that finalist conversation. And it's value versus criteria, but it could be value versus pricing too. You should have a pricing dollar number in your head as to what your company is going to allow you to spend and where you've got to get that into. So pricing or whatever else, what other criteria your company is demanding that you have in play. And prepare a findings document. Prepare a presentation, just like I'm doing today, to show your leadership how detailed of a process you took them through and who was your selected vendor and why they were selected. So present those findings to your leadership, and then communicate the decision to the finalist vendors and schedule a kickoff. So hopefully after you presented your findings and your details to your leadership team, they go, gosh, go forward. We've got the dollars allocated, go get it done. So then you go to your finalists and you say, hey, vendor number one, unfortunately, I know you were a finalist. We didn't select you for the following reasons. Go to vendor number two. Vendor number two, you're our finalist. You've won our bake-off, and we'd like to schedule a kickoff with you. And then you begin vendor negotiations. So what's the timing by which you want to get things done? How much consultation do you want to be part of this engagement? And what's the cost, if there is any cost associated with it? 9 times out of 10, they're going to look at specific cost for consultation. So make sure that's factored into your budgets. What's the definition of success? Is it just the implementation of the tool? I would suggest that you don't want to just define it as they've come in, they've set it up, do the modules run? I want to make sure the modules run. I want to make sure I've got reports defined and that work. I maybe want a dashboard built for me. I need to ensure that every integration point integrates and works, and that there's specific training that you need to make sure happens as part of this overall effort. So that training, how many people are you going to train? You're going to train, you're doing a train the trainer. Are they training? Are you training? What's the level of training and the definition of how you're going to get trained? And again, that should be part of your definition of success.
Hey, Joe, could I just step in here and do a quick time check? You asked me to let you know when there was about 20 minutes left, so there was time for Q&A, and there's a little less than 20 minutes now.
Excellent. Thank you. We're bringing it home here. So step 6. So you've spent your time, you've talked to your vendor, you've built your criterion out, you've done all your homework, you're dealing with your finalists. It's now time to kick off and start to work with that vendor. So critical during that time period that you're managing your vendor effectively. So a lot of vendors now, and with the nature of cloud-based solutions, a lot of vendors are going to say, well, we don't really need to be on site when we do installation. We can do it all remote. We can, it's cloud-based. It's pretty easy. I really want to drive you to the thought process that you should have the vendor on site, side by side with you during that initial installation. One, it builds good rapport with the vendor and yourself. You get to know them. You get to see them. You know what they look like. It's not just some voice on the phone that's taking you through steps, and they are doing all the work and you're doing all the watching. You want it to be a collaborative scenario. So make sure they're on site for the install and for a period of setup and training. Very important. Meet with the vendor and the engagement team for planning. What's it going to take to install? Who do you got to line up for install? You've got people that you need to deal with in your ops teams for IT. Your integration teams. So if the financials are, like I said, for example, an Oracle financial backend, you're going to need to line up some people from your financial team that know Oracle to work with this vendor. The data team, the database teams, what databases are going to be set up and how are you going to interface there? A BI team, know where the integration points are. Consulting, who needs to be consulted with? How many PMs are you dealing with? Is it the PM manager, or are you going to have 4 PMs that are going to work through consulting with the vendor on the processes that you're going to go through? Talked a little bit about training. Administrator training is key and crucial. They're the most important person in this tool. If you're not thinking that you're going to have a distinct administrator, you should change that thought process. And it not be a time slice part of a project manager. Most of these tools require a lot of administration. You really need an administrator in your organization, and if you need to plan for that budget-wise, plan for it up front. Who's going to do user training? Who's going to do report training? And report training can be vast. Many of these tools have large amounts of reporting data to be had. And then I want them to set up canned reports for us, but also custom reports for us. I want to make sure that they're going to do all that work so that you've got reports day one, not 6 months after the tool's initialized, because that's going to show your immediate value. All right, post-install. So the tool was a wild success. Everything's running. Now it's time to continue to work your vendor. You just paid them a lot of money. It's been a great scenario, but you need to show a return, and you need to continue to show that return, whether it's through those daily, weekly, monthly reports that you're doing, or the finance value of what you're doing on a daily, weekly, monthly basis. You need to make sure that this tool continues to show return on investment from the day one to day 101. Don't be afraid to play the value card with your vendor. If you feel like you're not getting the value, go to the vendor and say, this tool is not bringing value to the organization. I guarantee you they're going to turn on a dime and try to figure out what it means or what they need to do to ensure that you're showing that value, because they want a renewal. If it's a cloud-based tool, you're paying a yearly rate, or you're buying it up for 3 years, they want a renewal. They're going to want to make sure your tool is a value proposition. Understand your contract. Do you have a yearly contract, a multi-year contract? Is there additional training that's there? What's the upgrade scenario, right? So how many system upgrades do you get? When do you get them? Schedule a regular review meeting with this vendor. Talk to them on a monthly basis. I encourage that. Don't let them go more than a month. And not just the salesperson. See if you can get a contact to somebody who's product-oriented. Spend some time to be involved in their user groups. If they don't have user groups, they're probably not a quality PPM vendor. Follow-up training, build it into your yearly budget, whether you go to a conference. I know a number of these tool vendors have yearly conferences. Make sure you've got a budget that you can go to these conferences and be educated. Make sure you understand what the licensing agreement is so that you can actually get in there and adjust licenses if you need to, based on, as you build more and more value in the tool, more and more people are going to want access. As I said before, please make sure that you have established a solid system admin for the tool going forward in your organization. All right, in summary, and then we'll have 10 minutes of questions or so. So let's just go back for a minute. Assess your PMO on a regular basis. Regular means maybe once a year. If you're a small organization, maybe you can do it on the fly a lot more. Assess where you are. Constantly try to improve and move down that PPM path. It's probably not a down, it's probably up the PPM path. Understand your strengths and weaknesses and use them to your advantage. Again, don't be afraid to share a weakness, but always share a weakness along with a plan to improve or eliminate that weakness. Build a step-by-step plan. I've given you most of the basic building blocks of building your step-by-step plan. You can take this presentation and it's going to give you a huge leg up on that step-by-step plan, but fill in those details. Make sure it's step-by-step. Work your tool vendors. They're all going to tell you that everything works well and their tool does everything, but that's what they're paid to do. Also use them to help you fill in weaknesses if they can. Finance, finance, finance. If you can convince finance that this tool has value, trust me, you'll get budget money. Work your vendor, work your vendor, work your vendor. And as I said, system administrators are key to your success. So let's open it up for questions.
Not seeing any questions come in right now, Joe. Does anybody have any questions?
Either I've completely confused everybody, or I was just so thorough that there just aren't any questions. I got to believe there's questions out there, though.
Okay, we do have a question coming in, and the question is, how do you feel PPM process overlays with a scaled agile methodology?
That's a great question. As I talked about process, it's got to be lean and mean, right? So a scaled agile process doesn't mean there isn't any governance. In fact, a scaled agile process really means that there's a great level of governance that you've already engaged. So a PPM tool can still play a role because you still have reporting. You still have to be able to report where you are in an iteration, or in any of the scenarios that you have as you're moving through that cycle. So finance has still got to know where you are. Prioritization of projects still has to happen. Resources, even in a dedicated sense against an agile format, still have to be allocated and prioritized. So that tool can help you smooth all that out. And in so many ways, the automation can make things virtually automatic throughout that life cycle.
Great, hopefully that answered your question. And if anybody else has any questions, feel free. We've got a few more minutes on here. No, nothing else is coming through, Joe. So I guess you covered all the areas.
If you do have questions, you're being shy, or a question pops up later on, and you get into this process, feel free to reach out. I gave you my contact information on the first slide. I'm very happy to talk to anybody about, you know, how you select that PPM tool. I've gone through the process multiple times. How you look at yourself from a maturity perspective, how you audit. Feel free to contact me via LinkedIn or via email, and I'd be happy to have a conversation with you. Some great tools out in the marketplace, guys, too. So there's some new tools out there. If you're looking at a PPM tool, I'd encourage you to look at the standard tools like ChangePoint, CA, Microsoft PlanView, but there's also tools out there like Rike, which is spelled W-R-I-K-E, which is getting great press in the marketplace out there. So great tools can do great things for your company.
Great. Thanks so much, Joe. This was a really informative presentation. We really appreciate your time.
Very good. I thank you all for your time.
Hi, everyone. This is Brian. I just wanted to come back in and again, thank you, Joe, for this really great presentation. Again, PMO partners, for those that are interested in learning more, you can go to our website. That's www.pmopart.com, or you can email me or give me a shout, or get in touch through LinkedIn, however you want to get in touch. Our next webinar is planned for September 20th from 12 to 1. That's Wednesday, September 20th. Marie Bancuti will be joining us again, talking about educating stakeholders to improve project success. So really looking forward to that. This will be Marie's second time joining us for a webinar. So hope to see everyone back again on September 20th.
Great. Thanks, Brian. Thanks, everyone, for joining us today, and have a great day.
Have a great day. Thank you.